The first time I truly met Julien Whitaker, he offered me a business proposal. I should have turned and walked out right then, but I didn't. I sat there in an office that felt like it belonged on another planet and listened as he dismantled my life and reassembled it into a transaction. The summons came like a bolt from the blue, a message that the CEO of Whitaker Tech wanted to see me, personally and immediately. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. I'd only ever seen Julien Whitaker from a distance, a sharp-suited silhouette at the head of a long table. What could he possibly want with me, a junior architect working on foundation projects? His office was a glass cage suspended above the city, all cool marble and minimalist lines. He was standing with his back to me, looking out at the cloudy sky, but he turned as the door closed. He didn't offer a greeting. Sophie, I need to discuss something outside the traditional bounds of work, he said, his voice low and devoid of warmth. My guard went up instantly. Before I could form a question, he placed a simple folder on the desk between us. I need to get married, he stated, the words so absurd I almost laughed, and I propose a contract to you. A 1-year marriage. You'll have professional freedom, financial security, and you'll be able to pay for your mother's treatment. The air left my lungs. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of my chair to steady myself. Is this some kind of joke, Mr. Whitaker? This is not a joke, he replied, his expression unreadable. I'm offering a mutual solution. A mutual solution. He made it sound like a merger. My hands trembled as I reached for the folder. The clauses were laid out with cold precision. A formal marriage, a public performance. All medical expenses for my mother, Rose Reid, guaranteed for life. A vortex of emotions, anger, shame, a terrifying sense of opportunity swirled inside me, but the anger won. How did you know about my mother? My voice was a broken whisper. Who gave you the right to dig into my life? He held my gaze. I needed to make sure I was offering you something that truly had value for you. The words were a precise surgical stab. He hadn't just researched me. He had quantified my pain and found its price. I clutched the folder to my chest like a shield, a pathetic barrier against his invasion, and without another word, I turned and fled his office, his floor, his entire gilded world. Down in the lobby, the normalcy of people coming and going felt like a mockery. I stumbled into a quiet corner, my legs weak, and leaned against the cold marble wall, trying to breathe. The humiliation was a physical weight, hotter and heavier than the absurdity of the proposal itself. He had reduced my love for my mother, her fight for life, to a transaction. But later, in the sterile, quiet beige of the hospital room, watching my mother's fragile form sleep, the cold, hard truth settled in my gut. The doctor's words echoed in my head. The treatment cannot wait another month. Your current plan won't cover it. We were already stretched so thin, the medical debt a constant looming shadow. I spent a sleepless night on my small balcony, the city's lights twinkling like distant, indifferent stars. Julien Whitaker's business card was a crumpled testament to my despair in my hand. I felt invaded, stripped bare, as if every effort I'd ever made to build a dignified life had been rendered worthless, reduced to a bargaining chip. But I couldn't erase the image of my mother's face, so pale and weary against the hospital pillows. The weight of that responsibility crushed me. By morning, my choice was made. It wasn't a choice at all. I called him the next morning. His voice on the line was dry, expectant, as if he'd been waiting. Can we meet today to discuss the terms? Yes. I drafted my own terms, lifelong care for my mother. A significant sum of money paid up front, total freedom over my social work with the foundation, and above all, absolute secrecy. We met at the Oak Room, a restaurant so discreet it was practically invisible. He was waiting at a corner table, impeccably dressed as always. I slid my single sheet of paper across the table. "If this is going to be a contract," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "these are my terms." He read them, and a slight, almost genuine smile touched his lips. "You're not like most people. I like that." He folded the paper and tucked it into his jacket. "Do we have a deal?" "I am not for sale, Mr. Whitaker," I said, holding his gaze. "I'm selling 1 year of my life, not my dignity." A cold, firm handshake sealed our pact. The days that followed were a surreal waking dream. The wedding had to be arranged with swift, impeccable precision. Julien handled it all with the detached efficiency of a corporate takeover. I simply moved through it, absorbing each decision as an obligation to be endured. On the day of the wedding, the cathedral was a blur of stained glass and staring faces. Celebrities, politicians, the entire city's elite had turned out for the spectacle. Julien, at the altar in his dark gray suit, looked as serious as if he were signing a billion-dollar contract. When I reached him, he extended his hand. His grip was firm, and in an almost imperceptible gesture, he gave my fingers a slight squeeze. It was so unexpected, so at odds with the man I knew, that it nearly undid me. "It will be okay," the gesture seemed to say. During the vows, we strayed from the script. Looking into my eyes, he said, "I give you not only my name, but also my trust." I took a shaky breath and replied, "I accept this new path with the hope that we may find something beyond what we seek." The kiss was supposed to be a formality, but when his lips met mine, there was a hesitation, a current of something unplanned and electric. He pulled away a second too late, and I felt my heart stutter in a way that had nothing to do with performance. Leaving the church, surrounded by applause and flashing lights, he leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "You were perfect." I managed a discreet smile, the good little actress. "I did what we agreed," I whispered back. The reception was a beautiful, exhausting performance. "Remember, maintain the appearance of a happy couple," he murmured as we danced, his smile fixed for the cameras. His penthouse was a museum of minimalist luxury, breathtaking and soulless. He showed me to my room, a suite with a view and a closet full of clothes that were my size, but not my style. "I want you to be comfortable," he said, and it sounded like an order. When he left, I dropped my heels to the floor and sat on the edge of the enormous bed. I felt like a bird in a gilded cage. The first weeks of our cohabitation were a masterclass in polite distance. We moved through the halls like well-dressed strangers, exchanging only the necessary words. At public events, we were flawless. Our smiles were rehearsed, our touches subtle, our gazes perfectly synchronized. But behind closed doors, the silence was deafening. Sometimes I'd see him late at night, hunched over his laptop, the blue light etching lines of fatigue on his face. Other times, I'd find him on the porch, staring out at the city lights with a distance in his eyes that made him look strangely young and lost. The change happened on a Friday night. A blackout plunged the city into darkness. I was in the kitchen, trying to find a glass of water, when I stumbled and sent one crashing to the floor. The sound of shattering glass was violently loud in the profound silence. He was there in an instant, a flashlight beam cutting through the dark. "Are you okay?" he asked, and for the first time, his voice held a note of genuine concern, stripped of all its executive cool. He found candles, and we sat in the living room in the soft, flickering light. He told me, his voice edged with a shyness I wouldn't have thought him capable of, that he'd once dreamed of being a Formula One driver. We talked for hours, and for the first time, we laughed together. The invisible barriers between us began to dissolve in the warm candlelight. After that, something subtle shifted. In public, the practiced gestures began to feel less like acting. A glance would last a moment too long. A hand on the small of my back to guide me through a crowd felt possessive, not perfunctory. At a Whitaker Foundation gala, watching children play in a new wing I'd helped design, he turned to me. "I think you make the world a little less cynical, Sophie," he said quietly. The words shocked me. They weren't part of the script. But life, as it always does, interrupted our fragile truce. I saw him take a call one morning over coffee, his body going rigid. That afternoon, the scandal broke. Marriage by contract, the farce of Julien Whitaker and Sophie Reid. Our private agreement photographed and leaked for the world to see. I was sitting on the sofa, pale and numb, when he came home. I looked up at him, the hurt and disbelief raw on my face. "How did this happen, Julien? How did you let this get out?" He was furious, a cold, terrifying rage. But his investigation was swift. The leak was traced to Ethan Jones, my ex-boyfriend. He'd sold the story, my privacy, for cash. The confrontation was bitter and devastating. The betrayal was a deeper wound than the public humiliation. Julien stood beside me, a silent, seething pillar of support, his tension a physical force. When we got home, I fled to my room without a word. I couldn't bear another second in that gilded cage. He came to my door later that night. "No matter what happens," he said, his gaze intent on mine, "your mother will continue to receive the best treatment." The gesture was both generous and a reminder of the transaction that still defined us. "Thank you," I whispered and closed the door on him. A cold, formal distance settled over us again. I buried myself in my foundation work, trying to outrun the label the media had given me. He buried himself in his business, his facade harder and more uncheckable than ever. It was he who broke the silence. He found me one afternoon in the conference room. "Sophie," he began, his voice rough. "We need to talk." I looked up. "I don't want this to be an obligation for you anymore," he said. "We'll cancel the contract. You decide if you want to stay with me or not." I stared at him, the papers in my hand forgotten. "What if I say no?" I asked, needing to be sure. He gave a small, sad smile. "Then I let you go. No hard feelings. No demands." I spent the night turning his offer over in my mind. He wasn't just the ruthless executive, and I was no longer the desperate woman who would accept the life imposed upon her. If I stayed, it would be my choice. The next day, I went to his study. I took off the expensive wedding ring and placed it on his desk. "If I stay, Julien, I don't want new contracts." He stood up slowly, came around the desk, and took the ring. He took my hand and slid it back onto my finger. "The truth is," he said, "I no longer want the life I had before you." And in that moment, without glamour or speeches, we truly began. He started coming home earlier, leaving his reports to ask about my day. I, in turn, would leave my projects to sit with him on the porch and just talk. It was in the middle of this fragile new beginning that I got the call from the hospital. My mother's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The treatment had worked beyond anyone's hopes. I cried tears of pure joy. I ran all the way home, bursting in on Julien. "She's going to be okay," I gasped, and without thinking, I threw my arms around his neck. He held me tightly, fiercely, as if he could shield me from every sorrow in the world. "You deserve to be happy, Sophie," he whispered. "Not because of me, for you." We sat on the porch that night and began to plan a real future. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was ours. And on our balcony, under the starry sky, we finally found what we hadn't even known we were searching for, a love built not on signed paper, but on courage, choice, and the quiet, certain peace of a shared truth. If this story stirred your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a dose of love dopamine. I'll keep bringing you more tales of passion, heartbreak, and redemption crafted for the ones who still believe in love. And if you stayed until the very end, thank you. You're the kind of soul who believes in love, even when it hurts. Love harder, dream deeper. Until the next heartbeat.